G'day. Oh, there we go. There we go. Just a little quick audio check. G'day. Yes. Okay, we're good. Yep, good. All right. Today is new day, new module, new series. So this is me procrastinating no more and getting things done. So this is, I don't know, this is part one of I don't know how long, but basically we're going to be building a module from the ground up to basically log, to create a fully fledged logging module in PowerShell. I generally do my best thinking in the shower, and I was thinking about what I need to do in the to be able to make it a really unique module to what all the other modules are out there at the moment. So a lot of those modules out there generally they have key things that basically people like from them. My whole idea is put all that aside, let's just build something a little bit different. So what we're going to quickly do is we're going to jump in onto the scene. I've got Visio open because what I'm thinking is I'm going to probably be doing things. We're just spitballing today, so I'm kind of working out how my architecture, how I want to kind of lay out each of the functions, how I want everything to kind of talk to each other. So one of the key things that I found was that a lot of people with PowerShell modules, there's a lot of different formats and things like that out there, which that's one thing that I think is the biggest challenge for a lot of people. It was something that I was kind of thinking about and how I could standardize that specific aspect. And so my idea was to have a module that rather than actually building, it provides the block framework in essence, and then basically you build configurations, you log configurations out of it. So rather than having to have a dedicated, an SMS trace format, that would just be a configuration type. If you want plain text, that would be a configuration type. If you want anything else, that would be a configuration type. So I think that's the intention. Depending on how it goes, we'll see how it goes. So my idea here is obviously with the module, I'm thinking something along these lines. So module build. So my idea. So obviously there's multiple logging formats. I think the key ones I'm actually needing to focus on at the moment is SMS trace, application insights, and these are my primaries, and my secondaries will be we could say like something that most people like and the things flicking around. The secondary one could be something like syslog and log analytics. My whole idea is I want to be able to create a configuration, and then I want to be able to create in essence a framework that people can use to basically log how they want to log. So it's not dependent on it's not specifically dependent on type as much. It's kind of decoupling type into a configuration rather than actually physical code. This kind of leads me, you can go down two avenues. The first avenue is we can go down, I'm just going to call this as logging, as configuration. So the first avenue we can go down is, we could use using Pesta, using a similar layout There's pester, oh, there's DSC. So basically we have a DSC which generates a configuration. Or using JSON YAML, you define configuration for each type. Now, my idea is, so there's still, in essence, there still needs to be core requirements for this to work. So I think for the initial, which would be, trace, so there'll be, at the moment we'll need two types of logging. We have file system and application insights. So there would be still some hard coding that would be required for it to work. Question is, do I build a configuration or I build a class? That's another thing. Like, the only reason why I'm thinking configuration is because that means that then other people can actually build on the configuration versus actually then building a class as per se. So if you build a configuration, so let's say you have a configuration as a PowerShell configuration, for example. Let's just go call it pslog. So if we look at, for example, logging as configuration, we could use a pslog framework like so. And then we could declare the parameter to be type. So we could say this is application insights. And then within here, we have pre-programmed values that need to be set. So we need so the name, dependencies, libraries. Well, you have DSC resources. So maybe resources. So like so, and then you could have like an array of resources. So like you could have REST, OAuth, and you could have like REST file system, so you could have like PS log REST, PS elf, PS REST, PS file system. So you build your resource like that. Then you can put your dependencies in here. So dependencies could be I actually like this concept. I like this idea, actually. I really like this idea. Just thinking about how it sits, and I think it sits really well. Like, you have your module name, you've got your resources. So you have PS file system, you could have like PS network. It's the only thing you need to be able to like get, you know, whatever. Syslog, for example. Thanks, Core, for the raid, mate. Yeah. I think that's what we can do. Like, I like this approach, actually, because if we go down this approach, it means that we can change logging and turn it on its head, and basically it's just configuration. So you have dependencies, and then what we can have is we would have a similar to DSC. You would have non-load, and on see dependencies. G'day, mate. What's fancy? Oh, mate, everything's fancy at the moment. I'm trying to, I pulled my finger out and I'm actually writing a PowerShell module for logging, which it's already been done, but I'm kind of, I don't particularly want to write another logging module. I just think that's just too cliche. And I'm wanting to write a module, so a PowerShell logging module, that rather than you, the module, rather than having, you know, fixed things, so like, you know, log to this type as, you know, log to this specific, as a specific type, you can actually write configuration to be able to log as your own logging type. So you could say, I want to log these details as per, you know, as default. So you kind of, in essence, you can build like, so for example, like I'm just looking at this example with PSLog framework for application insights. You could actually specify your resources. So your resources would be similar to like a DSC resource, where you would have like, you know, different resources that you use, and those resources then would be able to be used to actually make your log type work. So for example, using application insights to log, you would need, you know, an instrumentation key and all these other little bits and pieces, but then that is just a configuration. So you can make the project open source, and then people just need to add their own configurations to it, rather than actually having to have a separate module for a separate log type. It's one module, many configurations, and so people can just keep adding to whatever they want. The only thing is that basically you just need to have the resources to support it. So it's changing, rather than writing PowerShell explicitly to run something, you're building configuration to run implicitly. So that's my whole idea. Whether it works or not's another thing. So far, it's kind of it's interesting. So what I'm kind of just like mulling it over. So I'm like thinking about all the ins and outs and how I kind of want the configuration to sit, and then once I've got the configuration kind of a bit mulled out, then I can probably work on writing a basic, for example, a basic resource, writing a compiler. Yeah, logging to include stack, or logging to include whatever you want. It's really, that's how it is. Like, this is the thing, like logging is like completely whatever you want it to be. This is the beauty about it, is if you want to include, if you don't want to include anything, you don't have to. If you want to include everything, you can. You just need to write the configuration to do it. And so it's as verbose or as not verbose. So my whole idea here would be is, so for example, we've got on error. So I'm thinking maybe on error. I don't like the word on error, but my whole idea is you have on error, on warning, on just having a memory blank of all the streams, information, information on verbose on debug. So you'd have script blocks, I'm thinking, for each stream type, like so. This is what I'm kind of thinking. Information verbose debug error warning. Yeah, thank you. So you'd have for each stream type. And so what this basically, the whole premise here would be that the way the module would work is that it actually, I would write a custom, you would have custom PowerShell run that, so when the module loads, it actually will just run a proxy function over the top of, you know, your standard streams. So when you're doing, for example, a write, you could just do, you know, I wouldn't do a write host, but let's say you do a write verbose. Obviously it's been captured through a proxy function, which would just be a generic proxy function tailored to that, which is pretty easy to do, which would then execute the script block in on error. But I think that's still too much. Like, so the plan is to capture each stream, then use them to capture the pass-through. Yeah, exactly right. The thing is, this is the problem I have with this, is that, like, don't get me wrong, I like this concept, but the whole idea is I want to be able to even simplify it even further. So rather than having to say a person going, okay, if there's an error, you know, obviously we know there's going to be a write error. Now, depending on the, actually that's a bad example. Let's say you use it on verbose, it will write a verbose. Now, depending on the verbose action preference, depends on how you want to do that, so there might be another feature later, but let's say, for example, on verbose, like, you want to do an application insights. Maybe, so like, we've got our resources here, so it'll load the resources. Why not look at each object as it falls through out default? I could. I haven't thought about it, to be honest. The only reason why I kind of, I was kind of wanting to do it this way was because that was just, yeah, that's what I knew. So that's a different way of doing it, which, why not look at each object as it falls through out here? That might be a different way to do it. Open up for suggestions. But irregardless, my whole premise is I want to be able to, that way then you don't have to build the wrapper. Yeah. I might check that out. Okay. That might be a better, that's actually going to be a better way to do it, because I don't want to have to build the wrapper. The thing is, right now though, like what's kind of bugging me though is that, let's say you've got on verbose, for example, right here. So you want to write a specific verbose thing. I don't know, like, it really depends on the person. So for example, you know, some person's going to want to get a module and just, you know, want to get a module and just hit the ground running. Like, that's completely understandable. People who use PS Script Analyzer or PowerStar or, you know, DSC generally are more, obviously there's more, they have like their specific customizations and things like that. And it really comes down to, does a generic user really want to do that? And I don't think so. That's why I'm kind of like, how can we make this simpler? Like, at the end of the day though, I want to be able to hand this module over to the generic public, and then, yeah, write verbose will drop an object through the pipeline, same with information, so if you capture the types, it'll be easy. Yeah. Okay. Except write host. No one uses write host. maybe I'll write a proxy function for write host and then basically it just prints out you shouldn't be using write host. brain's ticking. My brain is ticking. So let's say the resources. So we've got different types of resources. Obviously there would be groups of commandlets. I'm trying to work out how to make this as easy as possible for the public, but still make it completely flexible. Because the problem that I'm having is that, like, you can have config, like, this is really kind of comes back to, you know, with compute, where you basically have a configuration and people go, yep, that's fantastic. Nobody uses it. And it's like, but the thing is, then you look at the likes of, for example, PowerShell, you know, like Universal Dashboard, that's all configuration. So I'm thinking, well, can we, like, I don't particularly want to, I like the Pester layout just because it's a little bit more fluid in terms of flow, but I'm trying to find a balance, and I'm just trying to work out, so maybe the resources would have, so you've got on load, on error, it really, okay, so the simplest thing this comes down to is the string that it writes. So, do we, like, for example, with application insights, there's different types. I think I'm just answering my own question. So for example, let's just use application insights as an example, because app insights is basically, it's a pretty different way of logging. It has different streams, it has different methods, which means you can use different types to log. So my whole idea is, if we have invoke here, so we're invoking, so this would be the script block that would actually be responsible for running the code. You would, in essence, everything would technically be, would just be hash tables, which would then be splattered into the corresponding commandlet, which would be a resource of the function, or a resource, aka just a function. That actually would be plausible. So let's say, for example, we have, let's just use let's use, for example, PS REST as an example. Actually, let's just use this as an example. So on load, so on load we could have, I'm just now thinking about scope. But my whole idea is on load. So let's say, so on load you could, it's exactly the same as your begin, process, and end blocks. So you could have, so you could declare your variables here. So we could say, let's just start working. We'll just go body. No, and these would be. This is kind of bugging me, but so if we got invoke, so invoke would then go. So we would be using a resource. say I think I'm figuring this out. So let's just use, for example, PS rest as an example. Let's just PS. Oh, yes, let's use PS file system. Let's because I think each resource would have its own uniqueness to it. So for example, PS network, that would be like your syslogs, things like that. But let's just use PS file system because I think this is going to be the easiest. So my idea is, so we have PS file system, for example. So file system resource would contain things like log file rollovers, things like that. So on load, you would declare how that resource would, how the resource would work. So on load. So in here, in essence, it would just be a splattable hash table, like so. And then here you would basically have like rollover. Archive. So let's say you have rollover and we just say that's true. File size is say 10. We're just going to work in megabytes. Archive is true. File path is ctemp. So you've declared your resource, and then each you'd basically, like, you could have other stuff like, so like header information. I'm just kind of like spitballing here for the moment. And then when you invoke, the invoke would actually be, so declare how the resource, so we declare the parameters of the resource here. The only thing is that I don't like about this is the fact that, like, what would you do? Like, let's say you're using multiple resources. So, for example, you're using like a rest. So after 10 meg, it would upload it. So I'm thinking, how would you write that to write your custom configuration? So, just thinking, essentially Well, actually, no. I just had a thought. So essentially, what you can do here is we can basically say, so yeah, we're declaring the parameters of the resource. So let's say we're using REST, for example. Which we're going to probably need to so let's say we have PS then we have PS, let's just say network, let's say REST. So we do something like that. So let's just go with token, which is going to go 123. In URL, let's just go test.com. This would actually be a URI. And then I'm thinking after that we could then go, so that basically would specify your parameter type, which would then, you could instantiate the resource. Which means then essentially, if you wanted to, for example, when you ran invoke, so on error, on warning, on information, that's the actual string message that it's capturing, and then the invoke script block would be what would be responsible for actually creating that. So you could, it would still be essentially super basic, but it also means it's scalable. So for example, so if we could use invoke, using, for example, let's just say hypothetically we're just using the like a PS, we're just using PS file system, so it's a PS file system resource. So like so, and then basically what we could do here is we could then go, if we want to write something, it would be invoke PS fs, invoke PS fs resource. It's already instantiated, so it doesn't, you don't need to specify log rollovers or anything like that. That's already set. And then you could have a pre-programmed. Oh, I don't like pre-programmed. Actually, you would have I reckon you could do something like, you could actually have, let's just say hypothetically we could use a splattable block. So you would invoke the resource and it would log. But then, so we could log. Like so. And then on error, let's say, so basically for an error you've got, you would actually thinking you could have something like I don't want to have prefix postfix. The question is that do you like, like you kind of ask, you go, you know, prefix, postfix. So basic postfix, suffix. So you can, so for example, with the prefix, you can go error. Look at PS3 line. Command prompt script block. Script block. Oh, that's cool. Thank you. I was just thinking how much fun you could have with this, but anyway. Okay, I think first things first, let's actually chuck this in a file to make it a little bit readable. Mock this in for a sec. Wait for this to finish. So my idea is, that's my idea anyway. Like, I think, so you can instantiate your resources on load. So essentially people would still need to be able to write resources. But then you still get the flexibility to be able to customize what you want according to the resource. So you could have, for example, evoke PS resource and params. The params would be what's that whinging about? Oh. I would do something like output error. Yeah. Like my whole idea, like the whole idea is I kind of like, I want to simplify it to the point where you're exactly right. Where, yeah, actually no, you're right. That's 100% right. So you can maybe just do this. You could say, if it's a script block, then you could output invoke and then let the user decide on what the output should be. Yeah. If it's a script block, you could then output. And before you invoke, set automatic variables for the user. Yeah, that's a good idea. That's actually a really good idea. And then let them set whatever they want. I like that. That's actually really nice. So if I mock old mate in yet? Oh no, he's still on. So the message would be whatever it is, short said. Yeah. Yeah. I like that idea. So you could actually, yep. So you have your message. Yeah, I like that. That actually is really nice. So you'd actually have your message for each of your streams. Where is it? And then they can just select or build their own with the execution of context within the script block. Yeah, that's the whole premise. Actually, that's a really cool idea. Thank you. So the whole idea, declare parameter of resource, onload. So you instantiate your resources, go to invoke. They can actually, yeah, so they could actually invoke whatever they want. So essentially, I'm just having a thought now. I'm just going to quickly save this for a second. If it crashes, it crashes. Yeah, to be implicit. So they would, by default, everything would be there. Are you on the PowerShell bridge? No, I'm not. Oh no. I'm just going to terminate this. No, I'm not. Well, it's definitely it's a journey. Put it that way, because at the end of the day, though, I'm learning a lot about PowerShell under the hood. Like you generally you write a lot more when you're obviously you write a lot better when you step outside your framework. You step outside your comfort zone. Here's a question: would you think so? Similar to you have invoke. So invoke would basically be like in essence it's just a script log. So you could literally have whatever you want written in there. That's completely fine. But what you could do is then have it define a format. So then, for example, like you said, actually, no. Having a format would be good because then people can, still waiting for the question, lol. On PowerShell Bridge, no, I'm not. Sorry. I'm thinking. Format would look like an on output. Well, it's not even that. It's yeah, like ultimately I'm thinking, okay, for example, it really depends on how person logs. Like each person's different in how they actually log. And like you don't particularly want to just say this is the standard, you must follow it. You want to kind of be able to at least give them the ability to customize it. So my idea is if you could actually define a format configuration, which this is now getting hard because you're relying on so much. Yeah, exactly right. That's like the entire maybe. Okay. Hang on one sec. How about this? On the error. Well, that's exactly right. I'm like, it's a configuration within inside a configuration, but I don't like the premise here is to be able to have the customization and the ability to be able to do that. So think of it as like most people don't really care. They wouldn't care at all. There'll be no thing. But for example, for the pedantic, like me, I would want specific things. Well, that's exactly like G'day mate, how you going? The only reason why I'm saying, like, I'm thinking it's actually quite it would be important is because, for example, let's say you've got well, that's yes and no. So the script block for the output, I think, I don't know. I'm just wondering, like, this is my theory, this is my thinking. Like, tell me if this is rubbish or not. Like, I don't mind. So if you have error on an error, okay, an error is going to have stack trace information. That's completely that's going to be known. So you could literally have so for example, stack trace is true. So you would actually specify within each specific log event type, you could actually specify the information. Also specify the different aspects of log, the different aspects. We'll just call it different aspects. So like so you have stack trace is true, for example, and then what if you abstract those into variables before you invoke it, like default variables? That's what I was thinking. Like, that's what I'm thinking about it, but I think, like, you could have them as default variables, but like I'm talking about the pedantic people that basically want to go, okay, for on information, you don't want to see, you just want to see a standard message. You don't want to see the date time. You don't want to actually, no, date time, all that's going to be logged anyway. But you don't want to see all that extra stuff appended onto the message. So you don't want to see, what function it's running. That's what a script block is for. Yes, but I feel like, yeah, no, I agree. No, you're right. I think if we keep it that way, then basically if it's an error on error, you could then just do a write output. Like, just like the way prompt works. Yeah, okay. I think, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, cool. Let's do it that way. So then basically, we can do that. So then we have a script block. I do think there's going to be scoping issues here. So I'm going to forget about that for the time being because that's not something that I need to think about at the moment. I'm just kind of trying to get my head around the configuration and how I want it to kind of intend. Then you don't need to fiddle with all the rubbish of being pedantic. I just don't want to have a pull request saying, can you please add this feature, and going, but yeah, no. And that's going to be like, it's going to be like a pedantic thing, and I'll be like, maybe I should just be like, have a like a CI script that runs, and if it thinks it's pedantic, it just like closes it. Well, it feels like bad design. Okay, that's fine. So I think so the whole premise here is that, let's go back to so we're on a load, so we're instantiating our resources. So basically describe how we want them to work. I think that's cool. And then we actually go to invoke. So invoking, basically you would actually then write your code here. So for example, if you wanted to log locally, you could say you could just say but like it question, what's your thought process on PS REST params? Okay, so my thought process is like it's pretty much all up in the air at the moment. But my whole premise is that basically you could load, like similar to modules, or it's just similar to DSC resources. You can have multiple resources that you can use. So for example, think of it as for some reason someone wants to have a configuration to log to a local file system. Once it reaches 10 meg, then it basically uploads to Azure Log Analytics. So basically they're not constantly streaming the log analytics, it's only batching it up after 10 meg. Now, out of the capability of the REST, and that you're not specifically locking yourself into writing a custom piece of code. Well, that's exactly right. Like, so it's not even that. Like, it's more along the lines of people can then write their own log, write their own log ability. So, for example, if one person wants to use start transcript, they can. I don't know why, but let's just say hypothetically they did. Then basically the invoke block would be then used to be able to do whatever they want. So if they want to like log locally, upload after 10 meg, or log locally, copy it to this file server, copy it over here, upload it here. So it's basically more of a, it's basically that's really the business end of the script. So that's where you'd basically be, like for example, with, let's say using PS REST resource, for example, you could have you would just then be using those resources to be able to integrate with those technologies. So you're not, so the resources are acting like a bit of as a middleman, and they're simplifying the process for configuration, but they're still essentially will be PowerShell. Yes and no. So similar to so on log rolling do something. Yes and no. So for example, let's say hypothetically we got PSFS params, and we've got REST params. So this is actually a really bad example, to be honest, but my whole idea is this is just writable code. So you could basically say, actually no. No, I don't like that idea that I'm just thinking about. I think it's crap. Because it's just going to introduce more complexity when it doesn't need to be. I think you're actually touching, you've actually given me an idea. So yeah, you could have specific values. So for example, with invoke, essentially invoke is a script block. So you could have essentially, let's just go down to the absolute basics. So a PS file, PS log. So you could literally just have, PS file system resource, log, and then you could just go event. Let's just say event. So then basically it will just log that. Perfect. If ref param, well, that's exactly right. Yes, so if you're using a REST, so PS REST param would be used to, in essence, it would be used to instantiate the resource. So you're basically saying, for example, let's use this example. So you've got, you know, the method to token URL, and then essentially you could have, for example, like the OAuth type, refresh token, access token, all those kinds of good things. So that basically that instance is then the REST instance will be handling the refresh token, will be handling all that. So what happens if you time out during the process? Angels would cry. Well, this is actually something that kind of comes from other things. So like you could do, so yes, you could do things like have on error capacity, but I think like the way that I would do it there would just basically be essentially it would just be a try catch, and if it fails then you would just do a write error. But yeah, 15 seconds waiting, would you? Okay, so in that instance, this is actually something that I was messing around with my other script. I was using you could actually use not PS jobs, what was it? I actually have the code around here somewhere. No, I'm just gonna open up another method. So this is an actual function that I wrote that logs application insights events. So what I did was it actually it has different ways to be able to log. So you can log the traditional request, which is like you said, you basically are logging via an API request, and that API request can take 15 seconds to 20 seconds. It's not good enough. It's just not good enough. However, the way that I wrote it is I was using run spaces. So basically, I created a whole bunch. You could create a whole bunch of run spaces. Call this function, specify the run space pool, and then it will just make it so. So basically, you could have, in essence, it's more like start transcript where it's actually running it asynchronously. I don't particularly care about the callback, so I don't need to write any sort of, you know, I'm not capturing any sort of write back. I'm basically just streaming out the log in a separate in separate run spaces, and then while maintaining the same execution. At the end of the code, however, obviously you need to be able to cap and wait for the run spaces to be completed before you can exit the code. Obviously, it's, you know, it's similar to an await in C#. So that's how I did it in there, and making it completely transparent. It was much better than using jobs, because jobs was actually a little bit slower, so that's why I used run spaces. There's probably other ways to do it, but that's, yeah. So in essence, I think like at the core of it, the premise would be unit tests. The premise here would be that basically, essentially, you would the REST method would instantiate, and yeah, you could probably write specific methods. So for example, like you know, the REST method, or those ones, they could be completely asynchronous. That would you could do that, but it's really going to come down to the person. That's what I'm kind of thinking. So that's my idea. So for example, with the REST resource, you would then, like, the way that you would tailor it is, yeah, you would have your asynchronous, you would make it asynchronous, all those kinds of jazz. But I think bringing it all back, I think if you can build a basic configuration and then have those resources available, and obviously they can be expanded on and, you know, improved, I think that might be enough. That's what I'm thinking. But if you have a whole bunch of predefined variables, I like that, because then basically you just go stack trace blah. I'm just thinking about how I do this. Imagine an out of order timeout. Well, this is the cool thing, is that basically if you're logging to APIs like Log Analytics or REST APIs, you can specify pretty much, or you can specify the date times. So essentially, you could actually, like, interestingly enough, for example, let's look at write transcript. I'll start as transcript. sometimes will get out of order. You actually see it get out of whack. Now the only reason why we don't see it all the time is just because it's basically running running a it's obviously running local file system, so its read and write's actually quite quick. But for example, with REST and anything like that, you could just, like, at the end of the day, you could prefix the event that's raised with you could prefix it with a date time. So yeah. G'day mate, how you going? Oh, how did you go? Now my scoop doesn't work. Okay. What's scoop? Sorry, I don't know what scoop is. Sorry, so that's, yeah, app packager. App packager, sorry, no. Is it, yep. Yep. So what we can do here is we could go. So my whole idea here is actually just be able to write some PowerShell. So you could say, you know, log the event. And then just go, yeah, I know, but like the whole, I think this right here is a winner. Like, I think it's the well, that's exactly right. I think essentially if we place emphasis on the resource, substantiating the resource, so like at the end of the day, I do think that there's a capacity here to be able to actually, like, right now, like, don't get me wrong, it's stupidly complicated, but there's the capacity here so if it's a script block, you can just write PowerShell. I can basically write PowerShell to go log to that, and then basically, you know, go log here, or, you know, if it's full, do something. And like at the end of the day though, that's literally 2 seconds worth of work, because all you got to do is just pass it out. You just need to create an object, and the object that is returned from the actual resource invoke, when you invoke that specific resource, you just pass it out, and then, you know, is it rolled over? Yes. Okay, go do this. So you could have a specific like you could have an output for that, and then basically, like, it would just literally be this. You could just go, okay, output. I'm just going to just use this as a spitball, like a spitball, but you could just go, you know, if output, this is like really bad, but you kind of get the gist. You can go get event. This is like definitely, you know, features right here, but you kind of get the gist. And then, you know, something like that. PSF framework is made by Fred. PSF. Is it? Okay, I think that's going to be it. That's actually a really good outcome. Okay, now we've kind of, I think we've sussed out the configuration enough to kind of work out what needs to be done. For the time being, yes, I agree with you, mate. I think we should leave. I think I'm going to leave any sort of custom string manipulation. They can do it within here. We can predefine variables, so we can just have predefined variables. Now that really brings it into how we stack this bad boy up. So my idea is, I like using Visio because it helps me visualize things on an actual stack level. Do a pre-call so you can allow more predefined variables. Sorry, what's a pre-call? Sorry, excuse my ignorance. I don't actually know what a pre-call is. Call. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No. Smart. So you can actually have pre-exec and post-exec. Yeah, I love that. That's actually really smart. So that's actually really cool. So people can put whatever they want in there, but you only allow one. So in essence, it'd actually be like a before or after all, really. So you just wrap that inside a try catch. Essentially, I wouldn't like to do that, but. That's what I mean. Rather than pest, it will be before each. Yeah, sorry, not before all. Yeah, it's a before each. Sorry. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So, this is the thing I love about script blocks is that you can just literally go, okay, I want to run this, and it just makes it so, and it just makes it so. Okay, I think I'm just gonna. What would you use post exec for though? I'm just trying to think. What would you use post exec for? Because, like, let's be honest. If you're writing a script, you do not care about, so if we dispose. Or do we just make it dispose automatically? Yeah, no, I like that. No, smart. Can't dispose what you don't know exists in global scopes. Dispose everything. Where's my scripts? Nah, you no longer exist, mate. I think this is looking promising, and I think the easiest thing, the coolest thing about this would be actually that having the configuration in place. Then basically, like, you could have all you need to do, like from a global point of view, is people just write configuration, and then basically the configuration's it. So before each and after each will be a better descriptor. Yeah, nah, you're right, mate. You're right. I agree. Smart. Yep, 100%. Well, here's a question: would on load be before all? I don't know. I think on loads like really it should just be begin, process, and end, but it's going to be begin. What about begin, process, and end? If I Google JRE and get Josh Rogan experience. Josh Rogan. I like that. What do you think, what do you think, mate? I think that'd actually be cool because then I think that's quite self-explanatory. You got your begin block, you got your process block, you got your end block. I have no idea what I'm going to put in an end block, but then you have your before each and after each. You specify your stream types. Yeah, I like that. That's actually really quite. That's much a little bit more intuitive. And then we have resources. Yep, I like that. I think that's really quite cool. Okay, cool. So we've done that. I think that makes it a little easier, and I think it's a little bit more intuitive. Learning about the internet of break calls using link labels and PowerShell Discord channel. Ah, nice. Yes, I totally like. I was thinking about them the other day, and then I was like, oh, like how good that. Like I was writing a script. And I was thinking, oh, how good that would be, you know, to have that in PowerShell 5.1. And I was thinking, oh gosh. And then yes, and I realized, yeah. And then it's like, yes, PowerShell 5.1. I'm gonna start. But that, yeah, this is the thing. Like you forget about, like I forget about all these little ins and outs. Like I'm like, okay, you kind of get fixed and tunnel vision on a way that you're gonna write. I actually think, yeah, this. I'm kind of actually really happy that you kind of rocked up because you've definitely made it really good a springboard where you can actually bounce good ideas off. So thank you, it's really awesome. All right, next step, how we're going to hang this all together. So pslog framework essentially is a function. So pslog is going to be a function. So essentially our function PSF. Can it? It's not package. You don't mean package support framework, do you? Okay. Did you try and send a link? Because the PS log. Yep. Okay. Alright. I think the next thing we need to focus on is how it's going to hang together. So we've got obviously a function. So expecting output. Require statements. Require statements don't actually load the module. I know they check to see if the module exists, but they don't actually load the module into memory. Because my whole idea was, if you wanted to load the module, you could just use a require statement. And then basically you didn't actually need to import the module. So ultimately, I don't like, it sounds really kind of weird, but I don't particularly, if a simple, super simple way to be able to import a module, but that's all side, so we've got our module. So my idea is we have old mate here, PS log framework function. So basically, give it configuration. Like so configuration. Configuration goes in. PS log framework needs to be able to generate generates an output. What's going on here? So if we got our function, cool. Not certain that this is what you should good luck. Oh, I'm using Visio because Visio kind of helps me just, I'm just trying to work out how it's all hanging together. Are you able to send me that link, Romero? If you're on the PowerShell Discord channel, just send it to me, because I don't think you can send links on Restream on Twitch. So if you send me the link, just send me the link on Discord, and I'll just go through, grab it off that. Alright, so essentially, so there's Discord. Yeah, have you got the Discord folder set up, like where you can actually create folders in Discord? Barely. Alright, so my idea is, let's just jump back over here. Let's just go layout.txt. Okay, so we've got at the center of everything PS log framework. So this is function. So we have configuration that we apply. Now I think when you import the module, I, 'cause, 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 ' you set the configuration. Fred's framework is quite robust. Are you able to send me his link? Let's see if he's in. Nope. Okay. Let's have a look. Yep, cool. Oh, yeah, perfect. Yep, thank you. I like it because you can pull the output from the object list and search against the logs interactively if you forget where you're at. Okay. Okay. I like it because you can pull the output from an object list. But don't tell Fred I like it, he shamelessly plugs this. Okay, no worries, mate. Okay. Framework specific to PowerShell scripting in general, but the infrastructure for general scripting type. Okay. Okay. Can you build custom frameworks? Can you build custom frameworks with it? Just trying to find some examples so I can have a quick squiz snippets. Oh, must have, yeah. Help party. G'day Adilio, long time no see, mate. No worries. Yeah, Michael, you can take apart and use what you need, but it's honestly pretty sick. I'm gonna give it a check to suss it out. Okay, I'm gonna check it out later. I might check it out later. What time is it? It's 4:30. Okay. Probably got another half an hour. I think. I'm kind of sitting at, like, to be honest, I'm actually kind of glad it's being discussed now rather than 50% of the project. Framework reliability promise. No breaking changes. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm just trying to see some, like, I'm just trying to see if I can find an example, because I want to see an example of, yeah, just any sort of logging, what it's capable of doing and how we can build custom frameworks for it. Because at the end of the day, if we can build a custom framework for it, or build in like a complete set of resources that can use it, and then basically just build my dependency off it, that would be easier. But essentially, yeah. I just need to actually. I'm just gonna head over to DuckDuckGo. Just do that. So is it built on framework? Example, on PowerShell, they use it for DBA tools as well. Oh, okay, let me have a look. Perfect, thank you. Get this company run.
Just let us escape and fly.
Okay. Okay. I might have to do some more reading offline. But what I'm thinking. Squiz. That's really cool. That's really cool. Okay. Alright. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some logging, reading offline. I definitely think that's kind of definitely very, very interesting reading. It's definitely food for thought. Honestly, I haven't thought about it, mate. I'm kind of literally, this is like day one, so I'm kind of like just thinking about bouncing around, thinking about pretty much how it's all going to hang together. Whole idea, obviously my entire idea was to build a framework, configuration framework that basically can just define a configuration. The one thing I really want to see is what PowerShell framework can do in terms of under the hood. That ultimately, if it can do what it can do, then that's fantastic. I'll be using PowerShell framework to leverage. I'll be leveraging that, and then basically most of it would just be just configuration. There's a lot it can't. That's the thing that I'm kind of thinking about. I'm like, that's the reason why I kind of want to take it offline, have a bit of a think about it, see if it's appropriate. I like, at the end of the day, if it can do what I can do, fantastic. I'll basically I'll use it, like, because it just means then it saves me time. But ultimately, if it can't, then yeah. However, taking its approach to how it does things would be very beneficial. So just taking not obviously its code, but more of its, for example, taking best practices from Festa, taking best practices from different layouts, and then basically combining them so that basically the community's kind of already got a leg up. So it's not something that's new, it's have to learn, it's just kind of can hit the ground running. Essentially, I think, like, that aside, this is probably going to change. So my whole idea would basically be you import the module and it just basically takes, it can take ownership, but it takes over all the streams. Import module, I was going to say take ownership of streams. Once it's take ownership, we could then basically, now, this is the one thing that's about PS Framework that I've noticed is that you actually are still writing with a function. So it's technically, like, the thing that kind of is, I I don't want it. I want it to be completely seamless. I don't want to even like. I don't want the person to even have to do that. So all realistically they have to have is a configuration. They go import module. That's it. So there's basically the module will handle all of that, and you do not have to like. You can still use you can, God forsake, you could use write host, but if you're using the appropriate stream, so if you do write verbose or something like that, it will capture that. Now, we could potentially actually in the demo we could actually set. Romero, what's your thoughts on log levels? So most like traditionally configurations are define the log level state. But when you kind of start thinking about cloud logging, for example, with log analytics and application insights has really cool features where you can actually, it samples data. So essentially, if you're doing, you can essentially be as verbose as you want, and then you can tell application insights only sample specific events raised, which would be like, so you not necessarily have to even think about it in terms of data collection. But at the same time though, like from my perspective, I've kind of like with my application insights logging with my other function, if I go write verbose or write debug, and obviously if the preference is not set, it won't actually like it won't log to, it won't actually show to the screen. That's completely fine. However, it will still log the event for debugging purposes. So for example, if there was an error, so let's say there was an error at, let's say, line 74 here, and then basically you have the previous debug object that you basically sent up. You have the object or the object that you're working with or something like along those lines. So it makes debugging much easier in that sense. So you're still capturing the event, it's just not going to the screen. Like I know, like this is the thing, like it kind of goes against how logging is set in the sense that traditionally people would go down the line of, hey, I want to set a specific log level, and the log levels would be appropriate for along the lines of on a local file system where you can obviously fill disks. But realistically, when you're kind of thinking about cloud technologies and things like that, generally speaking, like the size is not really that of a concern. Now you can definitely set it. I'm thinking you can definitely set it so there's no like, but I'm like, is it something that it would be implicit in the sense that it would just log everything, or then you could be explicit and define the level of the log. That's my thought. So for example, sorry, I'm rambling here, but I'm kind of just thinking about my thought process. So you could have a implicit, everything's implicit, so it'll just implicitly log everything unless you explicitly say so. So if you explicitly define a level and you say, I want to log, what's your output going to look like? Well, it really depends. So basically, for example, if you're writing a debug generally would pertain to debug objects, debug values. So this is, a specific value that's along that stream. I would say it really depends on the output. So for example, the way that I did it with an SMS trace, a debug, SMS trace doesn't support debug. It supports up to verbose. But let's just say with verbose, basically that's exactly what it is. That's exactly right. So so a good example is, let's look at you can have flat file, you can have multi-level layered file, but the thing is that's really comes down to the configuration. So a good example is I always come back to SMS trace because one, it's most familiar, but two, I love it because I just think it's really easy to use. Now SMS trace, when you're using config manager, is the best. It is absolutely the best. And then I took one of the guys I previously worked with, he actually took those functions and then basically rewrote them, refactored them into PowerShell. I think he might have borrowed some of Ed Wilson's code. But essentially, you're writing PowerShell events in SMS trace. And the thing that I found with SMS trace was that with writing an SMS trace, filtering was just hands down the fastest you could ever do. Like you could literally find errors as they came. You could cater for multi-thread because SMS Trace had an ability to have, you could have multiple threads writing into the same flat file. Yeah, it's pretty simple. Let the user decide. Make it implicit or explicit? That's really the question. This should it be implicit or explicit? Should we explicitly define the type, or should you just basically? I think we should. I think it needs to be explicit because I think I'm just gonna go all. Anyway, right. I think yeah. Okay, so that all aside, so my whole concept. Let's just forget about PS framework for the moment. I think if you describe it, that's it. Like you don't need to like, because at the end of the day though, I don't like if like for example if it's not there. So like for example if it's not there by default it can be all, and if you specify it, if you specify it, enable disable the script blocks. Yeah, I like that. I'm just kind of like thinking of all the different kind of, just kind of trying to play devil's advocate, thinking about what best practice would, how would best practice go, and I'm thinking, yeah, no, I think you're right. Having a log level would, to declare would then specify it, and then you wouldn't need to worry about it. Or you could do a logging level struct and then go input. Yeah, I agree. You got to go down, like, I think, like, if the easier that it is, then basically it's easier to support. So if you basically specify the level that it's at, then you're fine. I just think though, well, to be honest, I'm just thinking about how application insights, how people log an app insights. Because the way I log is obviously different to other people. Like, I'm Mr. Give me as much verbose information, because if I want to troubleshoot something at the on the other side of the fence, it's much easier to do versus kind of, you know, just having, okay, yeah, it's at this specific action and you have an error. Okay, fantastic. But no, I actually agree. I think I don't particularly want to. Okay, we can obviously, that's something later. But let's just. But yeah, we'll just basically assume that the user is going to specify the level, which I think is actually, yeah, that's fantastic. That's a good idea. So my whole concept would be here is you got PS logging framework. So when you import the module, it takes ownership of the streams. I'm not going to think about how it's going to do that. We're just going to kind of work it out. So once it takes ownership of the streams, well, here's an interesting thing, Romero. So one thing I was actually thinking about. So this is actually a really good example. You could actually like, this is just kind of, yeah, no worries, man. I really appreciate your help. Thank you so much. You could actually, like, this is actually really cool because, for example, with the begin process and end block, we could actually have you can put your header, your log header here. Then down in here, you can have your log footer. Like so. Don't know how we can unload yet. That's going to be something I need to work out, because at the end of the day though, like when someone writes exit in a PowerShell code, that obviously is not going to log. So unless I can somehow trigger an event on PowerShell closing and then halt the closing process or something stupid like that, which already sounds dirty as all hell. But anyway. So import module, take ownership of streams. Once we take ownership of those streams, determine I don't even need to do that. And then we just have separate functions, which will just be invoke, something along these lines. It's like something like that, which would basically invoke the request. So essentially, and then we could just have other functions. I don't understand your thought process. We're going to process. Think headers. Think footers. Think. It would ultimately be a trigger. You're exactly right. It'll be a trigger. Or like it'd be an event or a trigger. But at the end of the day, I think like it's food for thought. Like it's not essentially you know, it's not the be all end all. So it's just kind of trying to get my head around how I would be able to get, you know, at least have some bad ideas and see what we get. And I think, to be honest, I think I would like to have a begin, process, and end. I don't think an end block would actually be entirely possible. Before or after all script blocks have power. Yeah, 100%. I think you could probably have, like in the begin block, you could have like a good example is when you do a start transcript in PowerShell, you get the computer information, all that kind of stuff. The process block essentially is the process in the invoked instance, how you actually log, because on warn on information. Okay, so it's not an actual process block. We're not like, it's not essentially, you know, an actual process block. It's just kind of the concept. Then you're trapped. Because on warn on information. So essentially what would happen is you would have on warn on information. So these would trigger this. So essentially you would have invoke PS log framework, let's just say hypothetically, it would trigger that, specify the type, which would then specify, it would call one of these script blocks, and then it would call this script block. Between every command, that logging would be painful. So your plan is to invoke item 2 script block, then wrap it. So your plan is to invoke item 2 script block, then wrap it. Between every command, that logging would be painful. It really feels painful. I think I'm gonna need to have a think about it. Oh yeah, that's exactly right. I think I need to have a think about it. But I think the beauty of it, though, the beauty of the script blocks is that I think it's already simplifying the process already. So essentially, you define the configuration and you just go execute that code, and then you're done. So okay, so for each event is a trigger, right? Well, essentially, yeah, you would have each event would be a trigger, and then within that trigger you would have I think, yeah, you could do that. Because okay, so each event is triggered. Essentially, the script block has to begin. Yeah. Okay. So essentially, what you mean. Actually, I don't even think we need the end, to be honest. I think you need the begin block because we need to be able to actually instantiate, to actually load the resources. Process is just how it's logging. That's the actual process request, and then yeah. A little bit. PS log framework log the message. So you could. So if we go, okay, let's just go right information. Just kind of thinking about test is a test. That would again, I don't know, I would capture that. Pass that to. The login shouldn't be described in your resource. It should be abstracted away. Okay, so you think we should have onload on action then? Like, an instantiation block, but I would call it config. Okay. No need for process. Yeah. So what you're saying, just to make sure I've got this right, so we just go on load, on action. So essentially, but your login shouldn't be described in your resource. No, I would delete on action. Okay. Oh, so you're saying essentially move. Would you say move that down to on error then? Like, I'm just thinking, like, so you could have on error here. Well, that's exactly right. It's its own event. But what I mean though is that you could have like essentially the reason why I wanted this code to be here, just quickly undo for a sec. So essentially the reason why I wanted on action was because it doesn't necessarily like essentially you are right. Like realistically, most people like you wouldn't need it, but it's more for. So the action is the actual log action. So that actually describes, well, essentially how is the resource going to do what it needs to do. So in this instance, we're just going to use ps log event. But for example, for more complicated things, it's script block. So you can literally just write your own code. So essentially, let's just say you have this. Let's just say we're using ps rest resource hypothetically. And then you could go if output is rolled over, upload event to Azure. So you could actually then have that specific item. So it's more. What's the best way to describe it? I'm just thinking about custom DSC resources. When you write a custom DSC resource, you can actually write a custom PowerShell DSC resource, which you can specify. I have to go find it now. DSC is not my thing. That's why I'm kind of fumbling around here. No worries, Romero. Thank you so much for your help. I really appreciate it. The whole premise, I kind of want to make it look DSC because that's like the intention is to make it more DSC like, but focus on simple. Okay. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much, Romero, for your help. I really appreciate it. It's kind of garbage. Next second, it's like next second. Oh, it just reminded me of a stream where we had a meetup and on Wayne was giving a talk on DSC, and Glenn Satari was in channel, and he brought in Gale, and Gale was on the stream. DSC's going away. Well, yeah. Alright, anyway, thank you so much for your help, Romero. I'm actually probably going to call it quits for today as well, because I actually do think I'm going to probably have to take a copy of all the logs and all the links, because this has been like an absolute mind bender. Focus on the pesta syntax. Okay, cool. Thanks, man. Yeah, that's actually okay. Or a PSD or a PD one. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Or a PSD one. That's an interesting. That's actually interesting. I might. Okay, cool. Cool. Focus me. That's gonna be it for today. That was definitely an insightful chat. Thank you so much, Romero. Really appreciate it. I think I've got a lot of thinking to do, but I'm hoping that next week we can actually start to work out some of the control flow and how we're going to kind of hang it together. I think Romero's pretty much given me a lot of food on food for thought on how to make it go. So I'm going to take a copy of the chat, because I kind of need to think about how to make things work. And I think, yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. I believe that Quantum was asking about Fiddler. Are you still there? What's going on with Fiddler? I'm just gonna... Your video is frozen. Is that fixed? Okay. Do you get some random hand gestures? I think... well, it's not freezing on my side. It might be just... Okay, it might be keyframe intervals too high. Okay, I might need to bump my keyframe interval down. That's alright. Was it freezing all the time? No, it doesn't say. It doesn't look like it's freezing on my preview.
The race, like, and it's a race that I created in my head.
What's it doing on the preview? I think it might. No, I think it's the CDN. I think it's the CDN. I know that sometimes when I'm watching US streams, it's quite slow. Glenn is getting the same issue, so yeah. Okay. I think that's definitely a lot of food for thought, and I think I need to have a bit more of a think about how I'm going to do this. But yeah, I think that is pretty much it. With Fiddler's, I'm going to see if I can find some quick tutorials on Fiddler, because you first need to make sure you set up HTTPS proxy redirection, and you need to make sure that your browser is actually pointing to it. If it's not, then you're not going to be able to get, you're not going to be able to capture anything. You can pause. You can pause and replay. I'm just gonna see. Let's have a quick look. To be honest, I don't even use Fiddler anymore. I just jump on my proxy and go have a look at exactly what's passing through. I usually try and work it out that way. Yeah, where is it? yeah, okay, this is a good starting point. I'm just gonna old matey there. No. Actually, the only two I've used is observe and modify. So you can obviously, I'm like, oh, you can create traffic. That's cool. Yeah. Does that help you? Hang on. I've just sent you those links in chat. Why do that? Anyway, so I think, yeah, we're gonna definitely leave it there for today. It's a lot of work, obviously a lot of discussion, which is always good. It's always good when you kind of have multiple people there and you're kind of pointing you in different directions on how to do things. So, Quantum, you all good, mate? So make sure you're good, and then I'm gonna finish it up. Okay, cool. Let's leave it there. I think that's a very, very productive stream. Obviously nothing's hit the ground running yet, but I think we have enough information to be able to actually hit the ground running, and then start working out how to write some unit tests for this. So anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was definitely a deep dive into module, well, not even module design, but just general banter on how to do things. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll be back next Tuesday for doing the same thing. Saturdays is PowerShell 101 Live, which will basically be covering, I'm going to be covering conditions and filtering. So we'll be doing that, but essentially that will be it. So guys, have a good one, and see you next time. Bye for now.